The HARDSD part I ever PLAYED by Alfred H Miles. I come of an acting family. We all took to the stage as young ducks take to the water, and though we are none of us geniuses, yet we got on. My three brothers are at the present time starring, either in the provinces or in America. My two elder sisters, having strutted and fretted their hour upon the stage, are married to respectable city men. I, Sybil Gascoigne, have acted almost as long as I can remember. The little ones, Kate and Dick, are still at school, but when they leave the first thing they do will be to look out for an engagement. I do not think we were ever any of us very much in love with the profession. We took things easily. Of course there were some parts we liked better than others, but we played everything that came in our way: comedy, farce, melodrama. My elder sisters quitted the stage before they had much time to distinguish themselves. They were each in turn, on their marriage, honored with a paragraph in the principal dramatic papers, but no one said the stage had sustained an irreparable loss, or that the profession was robbed of one of its brightest ornaments. I was following very much in my sister's footsteps. The critics always spoke well of me. I never got a slating in my life, but then before the criticism was in print, I could almost have repeated word for word the phrases that would be used. Miss Gascoigne was painstaking and intelligent as usual. The part was safe in the hands of that promising young actress, Sybil Gascoigne. With opinions such as these I was well content. My salary was regularly paid, I could always reckon on a good engagement, and even if my profession failed me there was Jack to fall back upon, and Jack was substantial enough to fall back upon with no risk of hurting oneself. He was 6 feet 2, with broad, square shoulders and arms. Well, when Jack's arms were round you you felt as if you did not want anything else in the world. At least, that is how I felt. Jack ought to have been in the Life Guards, and he would have been only a wealthy uncle offered to do something for him, and of course such an offer was not to be refused, and the something turned out to be a clerkship in the uncle's business, with a view to a partnership, as the advertisements say. Now the business was not a pretty or a romantic one, it had something to do with leather, but it was extremely profitable, and as I looked forward to one day sharing all Jack's worldly goods, I did not grumble at the leather. Not that Jack had ever yet said a word to me which I could construe into a downright offer. He had looked, certainly, but then with eyes like his, there is no knowing what they may imply. They were dark blue eyes, and his hair was bright brown, with a touch of yellow in it, and his mustache was tawny, and his skin was sunburnt to a healthy red. We had been introduced in quite the orthodox way. We had not fallen in love across the footlights. He seldom came to see me act, but sometimes he would drop in to supper, perhaps on his way from a dinner or to a dance, and if I could make him stay with us until it was too late to go to that dance, what a happy girl I used to be. My mother, with the circumspection that belongs to mothers, told me that he was only flirting, and that I had better turn my attention to somebody else. Somebody else, as if anyone were worth even looking at after Jack Curtis. I pitied every girl who was not engaged to him. How could my sisters be happy? Resigned, content they might be, but to be married and done for, and afterwards to meet Jack. Well, imagination failed me to depict the awfulness of such a calamity. It was quite time he spoke, there can be no doubt of that, although Jack Curtis was too charming to be bound by the rules which govern ordinary mortals. Still, I could not help feeling uneasy and apprehensive. How could I tell how he carried on at those gay and festive scenes in which I was not included? A proud earl's lovely daughter might be yearning to bestow her hand upon him. A duchess might have marked him for her own. Possibly my jealous fears exaggerated the importance of the society in which he moved, but it seemed to me that if Jack had been bidden to a friendly dinner at Buckingham Palace, it was only what might be expected. Well, there came a night when we expected Jack to supper and he appeared not, only in his place, a few lines to say that he was going to start at once for his holiday. A friend had just invited him to join him on his yacht. He added in a postscript, "I will write later." He did not write. Hours, days, weeks passed, and not a word did we hear. "It is a break off," said my mother consolingly. "He had got tired of us all, and he thought this the easiest way of letting us know. I told you there was an understanding between him and Isabel Kisham. Anyone could see that with half an eye." I turned away shuddering. "Terrible gales," said my father, rustling the newspaper comfortably in his easy chair. "Great disasters among the shipping. I shouldn't wonder if the yacht young what's-his-name went out and were come to grief." I grew pale and thin and dispirited. I knew the ladies of our company made nasty remarks about me. One day I overheard two of them talking. She never was much of an actress, and now she merely walks through her part. They never had any feeling for art, not one of those Gascogny girls. No feeling for art. What a low, mean, spiteful, wicked thing to say. And the worst of it was that it was so true. I resolved at once that I would do something desperate. The last piece brought out at our theater had been a frost. It had dragged along until the advertisements were able to announce 15th night of the great realistic drama, and various scathing paragraphs from the papers were pruned down and weeded till they seemed unstinted praise. Thus, it was not the fault of the management that the new play was so far from being a triumphant success, was cut down to one modest sentence: a triumphant success. A few enthusiastic cheers from personal friends alone broke the ominous silence when the curtain fell, became briefly enthusiastic cheers. But nobody was deceived. One week the public were informed that they could book their seats a month in advance. The next that the successful drama had to be withdrawn at the height of its popularity, owing to other arrangements. What the other arrangements were to be our manager was at his wits' end to decide. There only wanted 3 weeks to the close of the season. Fired with a wild ambition born of suspense and disappointment, I suggested that Shakespeare should fill the breach. Romeo and Juliet, with me, Sybil Gascoigne, as the heroine. Pshaw, said our good-humored manager, you do not know what you are talking about. Juliet? You have not the depth, the temperament, the experience for a Juliet. She had more knowledge of life at 13 than most of our English maids have at 30. To represent Juliet correctly, an actress must have the face and figure of a young girl, with the heart and mind of a woman, and of a woman who has suffered. And have I not suffered? Do you think because you see me tripping through some foolish, insipid role that I am capable of nothing better? Give me a chance and see what I can do. Oh, bid me leap, rather than marry Paris. I began, and declaimed the speech with such despairing vigor that our manager was impressed. Well, the end of it was that he yielded to my suggestion. It seemed a prosperous time to float a new Juliet. At a neighboring theater, a lovely foreign actress was playing the part nightly to crowded houses. We might get some of the overflow, or the public would come for the sake of comparing native with imported talent. Oh, the faces of my traducers who had said, those Gascoigne girls have no feeling for art, when it was known that they were out of the bill, and that Sybil Gascoigne was to play Shakespeare. I absolutely forgot Jack for one moment. But the next, my grief, my desolation, were present with me with more acuteness than ever. And I was glad that it was so. Such agony as I was enduring would surely make me play Juliet as it had never been played before. At rehearsals I could see I created a sensation. I felt that I was grand in my hapless love, my desperate grief. I should make myself a name. If Jack were dead or had forsaken me, my art should be all in all. The morning before the all-important evening dawned, I had lain awake nearly an hour, as my custom was of nights how, thinking of Jack, wondering if ever woman had so much cause to grieve as I. Then I rose, practiced taking the friar's potion, and throwing myself upon the bed, until my mother came up and told me to go to sleep, or my eyes would be red and hollow in the morning. But I told my mother that hollow eyes and pale cheeks were necessary to me now, that my career depended upon the depths of my despair. Tomorrow, mother, let no one disturb me on any account. Keep away letters, newspapers, everything. Tomorrow I am Juliet or nothing. My mother promised, and I got some hours of undisturbed slumber. Rehearsal was over, the last rehearsal. I had gone through my part thinking of my woes. I had swallowed the draught as if it had indeed been a potion to put me out of all remembrance of my misery. I had snatched the dagger and stabbed myself with great satisfaction, and I felt I should at least have the comfort of confounding my enemies and triumphing over them. I was passing Charing Cross Station, delayed by the streams of vehicles issuing forth, when in a hansom at a little distance I saw a form, a face, which made me start and tremble and turn hot and cold and red and white all at the same time. It could not be Jack. It ought not, must not, should not be Jack. Had I not to act in suffering and despair tonight? Well, even if he had returned in safety from his cruise, it was without a thought of me in his heart. He was engaged, married, for aught I knew. It was possible, nay, certain, that I should never see him again. And yet I ran all the way home, and yet I told the servant breathlessly, if any visitors call, I do not wish to be disturbed. And yet I made my mother repeat the promise she had given me the previous night. Then I flew to my den at the top of the house, bolted myself in, and set a chair against the door as if I were afraid of anyone making a forcible entry. I stuffed my fingers in my ears and went over my part with vigor, with more noise even than was absolutely necessary. Still, how strangely I seemed to hear every sound. A hansom passing, no, a hansom drawing up at our house. I went as far from the window as possible. I wedged myself up between the sofa and the wall, and I shut my eyes firmly. Surely there were unaccustomed sounds about, talking and laughing, as if something pleasant had happened. Presently heavy footsteps came bounding up, 2 steps at a time. Oh, should I have the courage not to answer if it should be Jack? But it was not. Kitty's voice shouted. Sybil, Sybil, come down, here's. Kitty, be quiet, I called out furiously. If you do not hold your tongue, if you do not go away from the door immediately, I'll shoot you. She went away, and I heard her telling them downstairs that she believed Sybil had gone mad. I waited a little longer, then I stole to the window. Surely Juliet would not be spoiled by the sight of a visitor leaving the house. But there was no one leaving. Indeed, I saw the prospect of a fresh arrival. Isabel Kishom was coming up the street in a brand new costume and hat to match. Her fringe was curled to perfection. A tiny veil was arranged coquettishly just above her nose. Flesh and blood could not stand this. Downstairs I darted, without even waiting for a look in the glass. Into the drawing room I bounced, and there, in his 6 feet 2 of comely manliness, stood Jack, my Jack, more bronzed and handsome and lovable than ever. He whom I had been mourning for by turns as dead and faithless, but whom I now knew was neither. For he came towards me with both hands outstretched, and he held mine in such a loving clasp, and he looked at me with eyes which I knew were reading just such another tale as that written on his own face. Then, when the knock sounded which heralded Miss Kishom, he said, "Come into another room, Sybil. I have so much to say to you." And in that other room he told me of his adventures and perils, and how through them all he had thought of me and wondered, if he never came back alive, whether I should be sorry, and, if he did come back, whether I would promise to be his darling little wife very, very soon. But all this, though far more beautiful than poet ever wrote, was not Shakespeare, and I was to act Juliet at night, Juliet the wretched, the heartbroken, while my own spirits were dancing, and my pulses bounding with joy and delight unutterable. Well, I need hardly tell you my Juliet was not a success. I was conscious of tripping about the stage in an airy, elated way, which was allowable only during the earlier scenes. But when I should have been tragic and desperate, I was still brimming over with new-found joy. All through Juliet's grand monologue, where she swallows the poison, ran the refrain, "Jack has come home, I am going to marry Jack." I had an awful fear once that I mixed two names a little, and called on Giacomo when I should have said Romeo, and when my speech was over and I lay motionless on the bed, I gave myself up to such delightful thoughts that Capulet or the friar, I forget which, bending over the couch to assure himself that I was really dead, whispered, "Keep quiet, you're grinning." I was very glad when the play was over. We often read the reverse side of the picture, of how the clown cracks jokes while his heart is breaking, perhaps his only mother-in-law passing away without his arms to support her. But no one has ever written of the Juliet who goes through terror, suffering, and despair to the tune of Jack's returned, "I'm going to marry Jack."